Thank you very much. I am John Micklethwait, the editor-in-chief at Bloomberg, and it's a delight to have Albert Bourla at the Year Ahead conference. Pfizer has always been an interesting company, but I think this particular year, especially when you're looking at the issue of the year ahead, everything depends on vaccines, and quite a lot to do with vaccines depends on Pfizer. It was Pfizer who were the first people, with their partners BioNTech, to get a vaccine through, to get authorization for it. They're on track to create 2 billion doses this year. But as we all know, the issue of vaccines is a broad and complicated one. We're going to come to that first, and then we'll come back to discuss healthcare generally and even the other things that Pfizer does. But let's begin, Albert Bourla, and thank you again for doing this. Let's begin with the new variants. The virus has mutated several times. We have variants associated with Britain and one associated with South Africa. You've said that the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine works with both, but it's sort of harder with the South African one. Moderna yesterday came out with a statement saying they were going to set up a special kind of booster shot for the South African one. I suppose my basic question to you is, how frightened should we be of these new variants?
I think we should not be frightened, but I think we need to be prepared. And this is what we are doing, as I think Moderna also will do. So we are focusing right now to have a very good surveillance network. So every time that a new variant comes up, we should be able to test, at least in the labs, if we are effective or not. This doesn't mean in the labs finding that even if you have a reduction in your neutralizing titles, that you're not effective in a real life setting. But once we discover something that it is not as effective, we will very, very quickly produce a booster dose that will be a small variation to the current one vaccine that we can do in very high, in a very speedy manner, so that we will be able to provide coverage.
And are you already at work on that booster shot?
Excuse me, can you repeat your question, John?
Are you already at work on the booster shot in the same way as Moderna is for the South African variety?
Oh, yes, yes. Way back, we had discussed that the possibility that a variant that will escape the protection is real. And we were working on a process that will allow us to do the development very fast. Now already we have started implementing this process. We are not working specifically on this variant right away. We are working on a process that once we discover a variant that it is sensitive, we can jump immediately into it. The work that it is undergoing is very intensive actually right now.
Can I ask a particular thing to do with the speed of the doses? Yesterday, I interviewed Dr. Fauci on another World Economy Forum thing. And one of the things he said very kind of strongly was he thought there was a need to get that second dose of all the vaccines quickly, because he thought that made a particular difference with these new variants. Do you agree with that? Because quite a lot of governments are pushing out the second dose.
I agree with that absolutely. And actually, I would say that it is important to give the second dose on time in all scenarios. Now, when I say on time, I don't think that giving it a week later or two is a very big issue. But in general, you need to make sure that you give the second doses as the studies recommend that the vaccine works, which is in 3 weeks. And in our study, we had actually from 19 to 42. Within this framework, I'm fine. But beyond that, it's a risk.
Is there some limit in that? Is that some governments are talking about sort of 5, 6, 7 weeks? I mean, there's longer time levels there. Does the efficacy drop off around then?
Look, there are no data to see something like that. And we do not have data generated when giving the second dose apart more than, as I said, 42 days. But every government, of course, has to manage a very complicated situation. And it is the health authorities of every country that has the ultimate responsibility to recommend a vaccination schedule. But from our perspective, we know what data we have, and the recommendation is that you should give the vaccine as was approved.
Can I ask you about the way we should think about vaccines going forward? Is the sort of COVID vaccine going to become like the annual flu shot? Is that the way you would imagine it happening?
Well, I wouldn't exclude that. Actually, if you were asking me 2 months earlier, I would say, well, yes, it's a possibility. If you ask me today, I think it is a high possibility, but we do not know yet. It looks like that COVID, the way that behaves, is here to stay. But also it looks like that we have the tools that we will make COVID like flu. Means that will not disturb neither our lives, social, or the economy. It just needs to make sure that we are very vigilant about the strains that exist, and we need to be very vigilant about vaccinating people if it is a need to do it every year, for example, and if this year has a renewed vaccine like in flu that covers more of the current strains, I think that's a situation that it is very, very easy to apply and put an end to the pandemic and transform it to just one of the many diseases, seasonal diseases.
Very quickly on that, do you think it would just be one shot, or would it still probably be one shot that does both COVID and flu, or do you think it's still likely to be two?
I don't think we have data about it right now, but if you ask me what is my guess based on the current existing data, will be one dose.
Interesting. Now, as you know, the big arguments at the moment on both sides of the Atlantic are about supply and getting vaccines through. Now, you've said quite recently that you could get 6 doses from every vial that you deliver, where previously people had talked about getting 5. Can you just take us through that and how that changes some of the mathematics, possibly?
Yes. Also, I want to clarify that the 6 doses out of a vaccine out of a vial from Pfizer was never a surprise to us. We knew it because we are filling the bottles. It's just that when we were doing the studies, we had 5 doses. And then when we applied for the emergency use authorization or full regulatory approval in Europe, we didn't have data to validate the 6 doses yet. So we applied with all agencies, with both agencies. In 5, actually, with Europe, we asked them, would you like to wait a few weeks to apply for 6? And they said, no, you should apply now. And then when you have data for the 6, you should provide to us. So once we generated the data for 6, we provided not only to Europe, but to all regulatory authorities. So right now, US FDA, European EMA, I believe the UK agency, the Israeli agency, the Switzerland, the WHO organization, they all have approved after they have seen the data, 6 doses. So that obviously is very important for the pandemic because a dose that was wasted, so that remained in the vial and then we were throwing it away, now it's not going to be the case. People are instructed to try to extract also the 6 dose, and they have the means to do it as we have produced. We have already supplied more than 36 combinations. We have validated 36 combinations of different commercially available needles and syringes that can do that. That has significant implications. For example, in the US, we had promised to provide 100 million doses by the end of the first quarter, and we will be able to provide 120 right now. The same is with the second quarter. We were planning to provide them all the way to 200 million doses by the end of the second quarter, actually beginning of the third. Right now, we will be able to provide the 200 million doses 2 months earlier. Similar situation is in Europe. In Europe, we will be able to provide way more in the second quarter as a result, not only of this, but of course, other measures. So it is a great thing for everyone that we are doing so. And actually, I think it would be criminal if we can use 6 doses and we were throwing one in a vaccine that can save lives right now.
That's very welcome news. Just one particular thing on that, on this issue about if you need an extra dose, does that mean you also need more kind of kit with it? Does that mean you need more syringes and all that sort of stuff? Does that become part of the equation as well?
Oh, yes, you need more syringes, but eventually you need as many syringes as humans that will be vaccinated. The difference is that right now you will have the vaccine much faster for the amount of humans that you want to vaccinate than before, because now you are having 20% more doses available to you. So of course you will need 20% more syringes available to you.
That's your particular thing on. You just mentioned the US. As I understand the mathematics, you said you've contracted for 100 million, which will become 120, and then you've got this second 100 million. But I think the total amount that the US could order, their sort of option, is up to 500 million. Are you in negotiation about that extra sort of 300 million or not?
So I think we are always discussing with all governments potentials for extension of their doses, but I have nothing to say about the US particularly.
And the EU, I mean, particularly on that, as you know, this morning there's been, and the past couple of days, there's been a real fuss, and it's not difficult to see why. I just looked this morning at our virus tracker, which we have on the Bloomberg website, and that shows that the EU is currently supplied about two doses for every 100 people. By contrast, Britain, although fairly lousy at dealing with COVID in many other ways, is around 10. America's quite close to that. Israel's close to 40. You now have this series of sort of dramas with Germany today, or the German health minister speculating about the idea that there should be a ban on exports. You and others, Astra, you all create vaccines in Europe, that you wouldn't be allowed to export them outside the European Union. What's your reaction to that?
Look, I understand how the public opinion is, let's say, upset. People are afraid about the consequences of this virus. Political leadership is afraid. They try to do the best for their citizens. And it's a very difficult situation. So that creates a lot of tension. The voices are getting louder, and sometimes suggestions that they are not prudent are on the table. I don't think it's a good idea even to insinuate in a global supply type of network that exists right now that someone can ban the exports of a vaccine like that. Let's keep in mind that a lot of the raw materials that are needed to produce this vaccine are coming from other countries. So if one starts bans, then what will be the response of the other? And then that will be a lose-lose situation rather than a situation that will help Europe win. What we are doing, and we are doing very collaboratively, both with the European Commission, that we have excellent relations, and also with the state members, it is to try to increase dramatically our manufacturing capacity. And right now we have announced that from 1.3 billion doses, we will be able to, that we were projecting to produce last year. We announced 2 weeks ago that right now we have a very solid plan that we will produce more than 2 billion doses this year. As a result, we have made initial agreements with the European Commission that we will provide them 200 million additional doses to Europe. Starting 75 million of them, of these 200, will be already in the second quarter. That's a promise that we gave them, and I believe that we are well on line to achieve it. So I understand the concerns. I understand that everybody wants something that can potentially open the economy, save lives. And I recommend a little bit of patience so that we will be able to do our job and provide as much product available for everyone.
What was the problem in the European Union? Given what you've said, it sounds like the main problem is to do with governments and ordering rather than companies and supplying. Is the problem simply that they were much later to authorize the vaccine? Is that the main reason why the European Union is so far behind, at least on the numbers I've said, that, America, Britain, Israel, these other places? Is that your understanding of why there's a sort of basic behindness there?
Look, the truth is that there was a gap of 2 weeks between Europeans and Americans or Israelis to approve the vaccine. But I think it's too early to say that Europe is behind, right? So we are talking about 3 weeks into the vaccination program, basically. And always the first 2 weeks are a little bit challenging. If you see the performance of the US in the first weeks was really, really not good. We had many more vaccines than they could use for vaccination. But then they got their act together, and now they are improving. I think it's a question of time until Europe will do so. I believe that the health authorities in most of the member states, if not in all, are quite competent in Europe. This is not a third world country and or continent, and very soon they will rise into the occasion. It's just that there is a lot of tension because there is fear out there. So let the voices calm down, and everybody, let's do our jobs. We need to produce more. The physicians needs to make sure that they reach the arms of the European patients, and things will go well.
So it's more along the lower parts of the supply chain, as far as you can see. You're supplying as much vaccine as they need. The problem is on the distribution from there.
No, I'm sure that pretty soon they will be able to get their act together, and they will need more than we can supply. That will be the same for all the world. Everybody would like to have more than we could supply. And I believe that when we will reach the second quarter, then this is where we'll see substantial increase in our ability to provide doses. And then in the third, I think that will be a non-issue. But when you are in the beginning, this is how it works with manufacturing. We scale up production. We are installing more machines. We are ordering more raw materials that manufacturers from other companies need to bring us. All of that takes time. And actually, the fact that we were able to do what we are doing right now, it's really in the range of miracle. But I understand that when people are dying, everybody will say it's not enough, do more. And this is what we are trying to do.
We have a question from our audience, which is a good one and very relevant to this, is how long will it take to get a Pfizer vaccine that doesn't need to be kept at such dramatically low temperatures, the sort of sub-zero temperatures that you have? Do you have a kind of target date for that?
Yeah, we are working on different forms that will be much more easier to store. One of them is, for example, a lyophilized version, which is a powder, basically, versus a liquid, and then you reconstitute the power. We are very advanced with this project, so I think we will start testing it in humans the first half of this year. If there is a need to switch, I believe that will happen later, either late in the second quarter, late in this year, or beginning of the next year. However, I have to say that the ultra cold chain right now has been proven that is working very, very, very well. The innovations that we have developed with this, I call it magic box, but this is the box that can maintain the temperature, and all the logistical operation that we have with dry eye, that we can provide dry eye, and we can maintain these temperatures over there, has been proven very, very effective.
You've had a few weeks now dealing with the Biden administration. Do you notice, I mean, other than the fact that they seem more open to science, what's the main difference between dealing with them and dealing with the Trump administration? And what would you foresee in terms of their vaccine plans? A lot of people, for instance, have said that their goal of vaccinating 100 million people in the first 100 days is now very easy to achieve and not really a stretch goal at all.
Look, I mean, I don't want to, first of all, to take sides, but there is a clear difference. I believe that the current president is very much science-driven and oriented. President Trump was much more gut feeling oriented. And when it came to vaccines, because it's complicated science that he didn't necessarily, he couldn't he's not a scientist, gut feeling is not the right way to go. I believe that people in the previous administration did their best to organize an operation that will help the American people. I mean, the indications is that the new people understand better what they are doing.
And the 100 million doses in 100 days, does that look all too easy to you on the basis of the numbers you've just talked about earlier?
Well, in terms of us providing enough doses to be able to do it, yes, we will. But of course, there are many other issues involved logistically. So the doses that they are in our manufacturing sites in Europe or in the US reach the arms of people that needs to be vaccinated, and that's up to the healthcare authorities to accomplish.
I'm going to come quickly to the developing world in a second, but there's another quick question from the audience, which is this issue of all the people, and it's particularly, I think, as some evidence, particularly prone in minorities in the United States, this issue about fears of taking the vaccine. What are you doing to combat those? Or do you think that's a job for government?
No, I think it's a job for everyone. It's a job for you as journalists. It's a job for the government. It's a job of every scientist that can speak out, and it is a job of us. What I would say it is that those that they have fears, okay, I understand them, but they need to think that when it comes to vaccines, their decision to take it or not will not affect only their own lives. They will affect the lives of others, and likely, or most likely, it will affect the lives of people that they love the most, which are the people that they socialize the most. If you don't take the vaccine, you're becoming the weakling that allows this virus to replicate. So please think it twice before you make such a decision, and don't let fear get in the way. Right now, I think, as someone else has said before me, that fear is the only thing that we should fear right now.
You just talked about that issue about the spreadability. I mean, there is also, of course, the developing world out there. I know you've been part of the WHO's COVAX scheme to get vaccines out to the poorer countries of the world. You just, I think, committed 40 million doses to that. But by any measure, that's much smaller than going to the developed world. Are you worried at all by the idea that firstly, the rich world does get fairly vaccinated, but then the poorer world doesn't? And not only is that possibly morally bad, but it also provides a kind of breeding ground for new variants of the virus. Is that a fair way to look at the next couple of years?
I would say so. I think in pandemics, you are as protected as your neighbor. And it is extremely important that we will not let what you said before happen, which is that the rich countries will get vaccinated and the poor will not. Not only because that will be a threat also to the rich countries, that's not the point. The point is that there is a human decency here, and there is a need for everyone to have equitable access to vaccines. Right now, I think both WHO and UNICEF, they are doing a really tremendous efforts to be able to resolve logistical issues, infrastructure issues, legal issues that will allow everyone to have access to these vaccines. And the contract that we signed with WHO and the COVAX facility, basically, and we are about to complete with a supply agreement with UNICEF, it's a great start. And I think more will continue after we exhaust those first doses. And also, I need to say that in the low-income countries, which are the countries that these doses will go, Pfizer will provide this vaccine at a non-for-profit basis. So I hope that things will improve dramatically.
There is an interesting and very difficult question. It'd be a difficult question for anyone. But it's how do you prioritize these things? As you say, you've got various contracts with rich countries. By any measures, fewer are going to the poorer world. How do you, personally, how do you try to prioritize which bits? I mean, is it business? Is it logic? How do you look at that problem?
Yeah, in an equitable basis. Let me explain that back in May, June, we reached to basically every single government in the world. And everyone knew where to find us if we didn't reach proactively to them. But we did reach proactively. And we asked them that they should place orders, and so that we know how to allocate those doses. And as they started placing orders, we kept coming back, and we were asking them, please, can you provide more? For example, in the US, the original contract was only 100 million doses. I personally asked them multiple times, wouldn't you like to make a greater order? They said no, so we committed these doses to others. Then they came and they wanted another 100 million doses. And that was quite challenging to find it. But eventually, we were able, by increasing production, to find it. And the same is with multiple other countries. So those that they placed orders, they are the ones that we are seeing.
As I understand it, those are all at the same, with the rich world, they're all at the same price of $20 or whatever. But the poorer countries, you are giving them at cost.
Correct.
Can I ask you a kind of thing to step back? I mean, you've been in the middle of this, you've seen a lot of it. When you look at healthcare systems around the world and the future of healthcare, what would you do? I mean, just to start, give a precise example. If you were in Joe Biden's shoes and you were trying to do something about the US healthcare system, by any measure, America has had a rotten time with COVID. I just checked this morning, it's over 1,300 deaths for every million people. You go to Asia, and there are many countries there which are fewer than 50. China claims a number of fewer than 3. So by any measure, America has had a rotten time. And although it's traditional to blame drug companies in this, the main thing seems to be a healthcare system that isn't good at dealing with pandemics. What would you do out of interest? So what's the one thing you would like to do to change the readiness of America, just to use that as a first example?
I believe that a lot contributed to this very absolutely devastating number in the United States. And actually, politicization of the COVID was one of them. It became a political statement not to wear a mask, for example. I think that was quite unique in this country, and that contributed significantly to the increased number of deaths. But going back, let's say, leave behind the COVID, what I would say if I was Joe Biden, I'm not, and is he needs to take his decisions. But I believe one of the big lessons that COVID taught us is the power of science in the hands of the private sector. It was the private sector, it was the healthcare industry that resolved the issue of ventilators in the beginning, and it was the healthcare industry that brought the diagnostics in record time when they were needed, and then later the treatments, and then now the vaccines. And those things didn't happen by chance. They happened because we had a vibrant industry. It happened because we had billions of investments and an infrastructure that had gathered the most brilliant scientists in the world, sitting and working together for years to try to tackle the most devastating diseases, cancer, Alzheimer's. I can go on and on. So, do you
think this is a chance to change the reputation of the complaints about big pharma? At this precise moment, many of the people who used to complain about big pharma are waiting desperately for vaccines you produced. Are there other diseases that you can take things like your new mRNA technology and apply it to? We've got questions coming in about whether we do vaccines for diseases like TB. We've got the issue about whether we could have the same kind of attention devoted to diseases like cancer. Is this a chance for the kind of pharmaceutical industry to change the dynamic of things? And how promising is this new technology?
No, I think we are having a good opportunity to change and improve our reputation. I wouldn't declare victory. I think what happened with COVID was catalyst. I think that moved significantly the needle, but the reputation is earned in drops. You can lose it in buckets. So we need to continue earn our right to be considered a pivotal part of the society, a pivotal value contributor to the society. And we should not declare by any means victory. I do believe that we are living a scientific renaissance. RNA is just one example of the things, the mRNA technology, of the things that can happen. It's not the only one. Clearly, I think mRNA had a very profound demonstration of its power, and I believe that this technology will be used. We are working on that anyway, in other vaccines like flu, like other infectious diseases, but also in other applications, cancer, etc. But that's not the only one. And going back to what I would say that the policies that the political leadership should be pursuing, I think they should be pro-innovation and pro-patient policies. Pro-innovation means that these policies should provide incentives, should encourage the innovation, and should encourage the maintenance of a very vibrant private sector in this healthcare. And then the second, the pro-patient policies needs to be policies that will allow easy access to all of these medicines.
One very last question, just on the idea of a world sort of vaccination program, something perhaps attached to the UN or maybe to the WHO, that there should be a kind of Manhattan Project to come up with vaccines for the future, where all the countries should collaborate. Is that realistic?
I think that the way that the things are working is not let's sit all together and work. You need to have ready teams that they should know each other, they should have the infrastructure, in some cases compete, because that's also very healthy when it comes to compete to bring life to people who will be best and first, and collaboration. During the COVID-19, there was significant collaboration between companies, and there was significant collaboration between regulatory agencies and the academia and private sector. But it was the vibrancy of the industry that brought it. So we should be focusing on seeing what went right now and build on it, what went wrong and take it out.